Talking about the do's and don'ts of cloud security, but in fact, a lot of it's quite generic because, albeit there's lots of architectural differences with cloud, ultimately we're putting data in compute, and that is the same across the board. So some of it's generic, I apologise. But that's me. I haven't got time to go around all of you to introduce yourself, but I want a show of hands so I know who I'm talking to. How many people here are dedicated to cybersecurity in their day-to-day? Okay. And how many people are partial, whether it's in a weekly or daily? Right, the large majority. Interesting stuff. Okay, so I'm going to jump to here. And this is us, cybersecurity. Everyone that's presented, everyone in the audience, collectively, we're worth 160 to 200 billion. I think I see some 2026 figures earlier saying about 300 billion. So I think I'm pretty bang on with 250 billion. But any idea, any guesses, shouts from the audience, hands up, whatever, on how much the cyber crime industry is worth that we're fighting out here? Anyone? Matt, you got any idea?
I think Wendy said, was it $20 trillion a year?
Something like that. $30 trillion a year.
I think she said 5, but she was bang on, and I'm so happy it matched my figures. Basically, we're looking at 5 trillion right now and 10 trillion in 2025. Now, this puts this market as the third biggest market in the world behind China and US economies. That's mad, right? But the important bit I wanted to stress was down the bottom here. Us, driven by responsibility and duty, wearing multiple hats, We've got a lot going on, a lot of systems to manage, a lot of GUIs, different resources, right? So what we need is actionable intelligence that you can react on, rather than log or alert fatigue. Whereas these guys, they're driven by earnings, by greed. They've got huge amounts of automation we've heard about already, ransomware as a service, bot networking, all the time in the world, huge pools of data and old email addresses, passwords, a lot of mention of multi-factor authentication for a good reason. So this is it. It's a war on revenue that we're up against. So really quick one on us. So I've got a really short amount of time. We're completely dedicated on cybersecurity. We've got a few networking components, be it switching, Wi-Fi access points with hardened security on them. But other than that, we're end-to-end portfolio. And it's all about this, 30 years, hundreds of terabytes of intellectual property. But most importantly over here, innovation. We've got 300 patents approved. RTDMI, real-time deep memory inspection, is the one that I'll talk about today, and our secret sauce, if you like. So this is what we collectively are up against. You've got a large increase of networking becoming more complex. COVID's driven this rush to work from home. A lot of projects have been deployed at pace, maybe without the due diligence. And certainly Sonicwall, we're seeing more remote access and cloud edge conversations coming back up now. People have settled post-pandemic. And then across the bottom, at the same time, you've got this volume increase and complexity increase in the attacks that we're being attacked by. Side channel attacks, cryptojacking still in place. So loads going on. So what we like to do, it's called boundless cybersecurity. This is our holistic view of cybersecurity. And similar to Microsoft, similar to a few other organizations, we bring out an annual threat report. In fact, shifted to a biannual. But I'm just going to summarize the real highlights from last year and the first half of this year. We take it from over 1.1 million sensors. So this is a 30-year company, over 1 million sensors, a whole wealth of information coming into us. We now see over 30 million pieces of malware blocked on our network a day. So last year, the highlights are 167% encrypted threats are increasing. How do I buy shares in that, right? The figure is a lot smaller than ransomware, 600 million. We only saw 10.4, and this is on our network. But the critical thing with encrypted threats is it's not an attack type. It's the fact that it's in encrypted traffic. And Gartner talk about 90% of traffic's encrypted. So if your edge of cloud or perimeter hasn't got DPI SSL, then you need to fix that. This jumps into this year. You'll see that encrypted threats went up 189%, right, in the first 4 months. Classic ransomware is down -6% globally, but actually domestically, we still saw 44% growth in the first 5 months of this year in Blighty here in Britain. So definitely not gone away. And one of the speeches earlier talked about double and triple extortion. These things are still happening. Ryuk is still, third year running, the biggest ransomware family, right? And you think, well, if it's known, how can it still be the biggest? Because these small anomalies, these small changes make that old-fashioned attack vector a brand new one again. Already heard about patch management, right? Very pertinent for C-level. I know why, I understand it. But in this case, which is still ongoing for many of you, I'm sure, Apache's Log4j vulnerability, there was a 7-week window of exposure. Apache released 4 patches in this period that didn't address the threat. So it's not good enough, right? Our zero-hour threat protection stopped this from day one. We were seeing 2.7 million vulnerability attempts on this a day in that 7-week period. So again, not enough in isolation. Cloud breaches, LinkedIn, Yahoo, Facebook in addition, the Marriott Hotel, the list goes on. There are many there. And what we're seeing is malware injection in cloud in cloud code, in APIs. There are new threats that come with that new landscape. SaaS adoption is huge, obviously. Office 365, Google Workplace. These systems are getting breached themselves, okay? These are shared ownership, shared responsibility. You put something in the cloud, it's not the cloud service provider, the hyperscaler, responsibility in isolation. This is a collaborative, shared responsibility. Now, Microsoft, fantastic figures just now, huge organization, biggest software company in the world, I'm sure. We layer ourselves across the top of this. We're not looking to be, when we work with program, we're not talking about disruption and tearing everything out. We're looking at assessing risk. The methodology I'll talk about shortly is accessible via any of our products. So we cherry pick where to deploy defense in depth. And we sit above Office 365. There's been a speech, or it's coming later, about email security. It's still the single biggest vector into the business, but you can't look at email alone. These products leverage collaboration. Now, if I'm at home on my laptop and I download a PDF, and by the way, PDF year-on-year increase is about 50% growth year-on-year in PDF compromise. So if I get a PDF document at home, download it on my own machine, connect to network, I can share that on Teams. That's using SharePoint, OneDrive, right? This is not using email. You need to cover collaboration as well. So how do we deliver it? It's worth talking about. I've flattened this slide because it takes forever to build, but ultimately, this is the heart of our business. It sits in the cloud. 99% of threats are instantly blocked by our 30-year of signature-based pedigree, okay? It's the 1% over here that comes into our capture ATP and RTDMI. This is the bit that ultimately you're paying for. This is the zero-hour threat prevention. We saw 5.4 billion pieces of malware, 54 million unknown or little-known threat variants. So these come into our sandboxing environment, and importantly, we're talking about actionable intelligence, what I said earlier. Yeah, only providing you a block until verdict opportunity to allow or deny. Now, the interesting bit comes with RTDMI. We had our patent approved on RTDMI in Feb 2020, and this is the last hop in everything we do. We've got 62 AV vendors, threat feeds, AI, you name it, and this is adding more and more value every day. Here's ICSA Labs. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're an independent part of Verizon. You can't lunch them like some other analysts, right? This is pure technology testing. And in this scenario, 1 quarter in, we were chuffed. 100% detection, 0 false positives. And then we run it again for another quarter. Well, right now we're at 21 months, 7 quarters, 100% detection. Last quarter, 1 false positive. And we loved it because it humanizes us. But this is no BS. I've been in cyber, or what now called cybersecurity, for 20 years. I've never had anything close to this level of accuracy. So efficacy is what we're pushing. This is it in the real world for us. Quarter by quarter last year in blue. Every time we find a threat, it becomes a signature. So this isn't growth. This is brand new growth every quarter. 64% year on year, the contribution of that last hop in our sandboxing environment. Now, interestingly enough, we can take this RTDMI and put it on an appliance and put it on your network within your cloud infrastructure. And you can forward as many files, as big a files as you want. There's no glass ceiling like cloud services that we deliver for all of our customers worldwide. No one else is doing that. So, why have a defense in-depth strategy for cloud or in general? I thought I'd start here really quickly. lots of figures taken offline, so please don't quote me too hard on them, but this is the HSE, the Ireland healthcare attack last year. This was a ransomware attack, typical healthcare, 2 days to open an email, but when they did on the 18th of March last year, they got the lethal blow of ransomware. It took them a further 6 weeks to have a service provider tell them, oh sorry, I do apologise, their AV took several weeks to find it. Then a service provider in mid-May, 2 whole months later, told them they might have had a compromise. Then we moved forward into the clean-up, June, September, 10% of systems still offline. Now, their CEO, late last year, talked about over 100 million euros cost. And the reason why I talk about this one over any other is because up here, you've got a lack of tooling. If they had Sonicwall in Office 365, on the laptop, on the perimeter edge, we would have caught this. Lack of tooling. Then a lack of operational processes. Maybe they had alert fatigue. Maybe they've just built up organically. Healthcare's got loads of legacy systems, right? It's unfair to pick on them, but hackers do. And then lastly, you've got actual architecture. There clearly wasn't enough network segregation and micro-segmentation. I know healthcare's not that mature in the cloud, but you shouldn't get 95, 98%, I think it was, of their network compromised. I think there was only one hospital that wasn't brought down to their knees by this. And I'm talking about human impact. Someone else mentioned it earlier. There were women in the late stage of pregnancy that had their appointments cancelled, right? So it's affecting our nation state. This is one classic example. So this is our NSV. This is our virtual firewall. Everything in green here is not delivered by Azure and AWS standard firewalls. So when we talk about due diligence for cloud, what I'm saying is if people go through all of this due diligence to do a firewall or IPS tender for their infrastructure, pages and pages of tender processes and features, and then cloud, we deliver a cloud project, and then after the event, someone's like, security. We should adopt this cloud service provider's standard firewall offering. Now, I'm not knocking it. I'm sure they're fantastic products, but they're currently missing loads of functionality. I was at NCSC's annual kickoff 3 weeks ago. Privileged to know Dr. Ian Levy. He couldn't tell me where he was going. I've had meetings with him and my CEO, right? We work very closely with the NCSC, share information, part of the Five Eyes, Canada, US, etc. But he's just taken a job with Amazon. So that is one of our leading experts in cyber from the NCSC going over to the privatised market, as he should, to get some money back from all his hard work. But it just goes to show that Microsoft, AWS, huge investments, are they up to date with zero-hour threat defense as of today? And that's where our layered security solutions come in. So what do we recommend? Insider threat has been talked about a lot. I would talk about it from a user awareness point of view. This should be pumped out monthly, quarterly, 6 monthly, not an annual contract. Do click here to accept our user acceptance policy. You've got to hammer it home. Mistakes are made, people download email, click on links, you name it. Shadow IT, huge one, right? Make sure your policies are theirs. So what I mean by that, and I said it to one of you earlier outside, I'm not going to restrict email file sizes to only 5 meg without locking down email, USB key, every other way that a user will find to do it. Your policy has to be followed through. Otherwise, people are just going to create new ways outside of your control to achieve their objectives. Loads of talk about two-factor authentication today. I would say single biggest, yes, deploy. But what we're starting to see? Man-in-the-middle attacks on two-factor authentication. The splash page that Microsoft just brought up, that's what we're seeing, right? They've got your password, they've bought it on the dark web. It's been in place for years. She just said, I've had a password for years, right? So they've got that, then they need two-factor. So actually, they create a full splash screen. You put your one-time 60-second password in, they put it in the real system. So it's not enough in isolation, you still need zero-hour threat detection. Endpoint protection, loads talked about, definitely threat hunting, but with our product as well, rollback. You get ransomware, works so quickly. With our 100% detection, even though we've detected it and blocked it, it will have started spinning up files. So to be able to roll back that endpoint and allow that user to carry on is critical. Consistent security, the single biggest thing. You've got these large, complex networks, private cloud, public cloud, infrastructure. One system, one GUI, one level of actionable intelligence straight into you. Containment, I've talked about it already. Micro-segmentation. Stop these threats moving laterally within your cloud environment. Third-party validation, I think the day heavily kicked off with this. Supply chain, the weakest route into the business. You need to do more than a simple online questionnaire or something. You need to know how they're delivering their security. What is their compliance measurements? Breach mitigation plan, obvious, right? But ultimately shift to a zero trust approach to cybersecurity. So that is, don't trust any user, don't trust any data, and don't trust any device. So a lot of the systems and solutions we're selling are about posture checking, remote access. Don't just let someone in. Let someone into the least privileges. If they only need web services, only give them web services. A lot of there's talk about DDoS attacks, etc. Cloud service providers are doing a lot of the high-level stuff. The volumetric attacks, right? Google blocked one only a few days ago, I think, or a few weeks ago. 46 million per second. The biggest DDoS attack in history, right? So these things are still going on, but the CSPs will take care of a lot of it. What we're telling you to do is realize the cloud infrastructure is not just their responsibility, it's yours too. You need to protect your applications. You need to protect your APIs as well. APIs can get broken these days. You need to make sure you look at the terms and conditions of the APIs, see how configurable they are, see if you can increase the security around them. So look, a lot there. It's hard to squeeze things into 15 minutes. I think I've done a good job, but I'd love to know of anything you'd like to know more of or any questions you have for me.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. Much appreciated.
My pleasure.
Any quick questions from the audience? We can just get the lights up a tiny touch. Haven't got any quick questions? I've got one for you, as you would expect.
Could have prepared me.
Yeah. No, don't worry. The threat report that you guys have done. One big takeaway from that?
One big takeaway is it just gets worse every year.
Right. Okay.
That global slide. The fact that we've got 11% compound annual growth rate in our industry and the hacking community's got 15%, it's just getting further away. So without that automation, without being proactive, how are you going to keep scaling and keep trying to catch up? The threat report does a really good job of that. Download it, 100-page long like all the rest of them, but the key points are encrypted threats, ransomware. They're the two big growth points. But I would say just standardization, keep things simple, and make sure you have a true zero-hour threat detection capability.